Hello and welcome to episode 175 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now, take a breath or take a seat or just stop what you're doing because today's guest is someone that I've wanted on this podcast since day one. It's someone when I grew up I absolutely adored his music. His band are one of my favourite of all time and he's responsible for writing some of my favourite lyrics ever. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Boyd from the absolutely incredible Incubus. This interview for me is personally one of my favourites that I've ever done. I am so thrilled to announce that he's on today's episode, but not only that, this is a two-parter. I was lucky enough to get over an hour and a half with Brandon, and we broke it down into two separate episodes. The first part focuses purely on music, influences, growing up, touring with Incubus and life behind his brand new solo album. The second part focuses more on mental health, ways of thinking and his artwork, so it all comes together beautifully as one and I can't wait to share it with you in just a few moments time. I still to this day listen to Make Yourself. Morning View is one of my favourite albums of all time, and if you are listening now and you haven't heard of Incubus, I actually don't believe you because they are one of the biggest bands of all time and I'm so thrilled that Brandon's been so accommodating with his time. But in true typical Mark and Me fashion, I do like to touch base and talk about my last episode. I was joined by the amazing actor Nick Blood. An amazing interview and some of the response that I've seen has been phenomenal, so thanks so much to everyone that tuned in and provided me with some incredible feedback. But I think we need to focus purely on today. Brandon Boyd from Incubus. I've been spoilt with time from him and I've made the best of it. So I think the best thing to do is to get straight to the interview. And it still doesn't sound real when I say this out loud, but here's me and Brandon Boyd talking all things music.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Is it mega early for you over there?
No, it's like 9:15 in the morning.
That's not too bad, you're an early starter.
Yeah.
I see the secret coffee.
Yes, exactly. Where are you calling
I'm in the
from?
UK, so I'm in a place, Shropshire, which you probably don't know, but I remember the closest place you played to us is Wolverhampton.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I think you played the Civic Hall and Wolf Run and stuff like that. So I'm about 45 minutes away from there.
Nice. Gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago last time we played in Wolverhampton or anywhere in the UK for that matter.
Yeah, it's. I had tickets with my friends to see you last year in Birmingham, and we were like Faith No More and everything else. We were like, "Fuck, we've got tickets! Amazing!" It wasn't that crazy rush, and then everything's just collapsed.
Amazing how quickly everything just changed. What a remarkable period of time we've been living through, huh?
It's insane. Like you couldn't ever describe it to anyone that hasn't been there and lived it. Like if you had said to yourself 5 years ago, there'll be this period of time for 2 years where you won't be able to do the things that you probably take for granted, like go to the cinema, go and watch a gig, go and sit with your family at Christmas. And now it's like, last year I remember not seeing my family and not being able to go to gigs like yours and festivals, like Download and all that was all cancelled, which is insane. I thought, don't worry, next year it'll be back to normal. And now we're here just about putting the TV on and hearing that we might not have it again this year or 2022.
You said 2 years and I'm just I'm like looking for like wood to touch. Here we go. Knock wood. I mean, but it's like there's always the possibility that it'll just kind of keep droning on for an indefinite period of time. I can only hope that that's not the case. I suppose that there's like there's always a silver lining to be found amongst any circumstances, even the most dire of circumstances. And I'm sure you have found some in your experience as well. But one of the things that's been super interesting for me is this period of time, this last 2 years. It's like somebody like pulled different layers, like the onion got peeled back towards its core more than ever before, interpersonally, societally, culturally, psychologically. There was it's as if we were experiencing life through a sequence of veils, you know?
Yeah.
Like there was like things were being obscured and they were so obscured that we weren't even really aware of it anymore. And then as the pandemic has droned on, it's like more and more veils getting pulled down and you're seeing more and more clearly, and it's more and more shocking as it goes along. It's really wild. It's absolutely fascinating from certain perspectives. In other ways, it's infuriating to endure. But yeah, you're obviously you're healthy and warm in your beautiful little room there.
I haven't suffered. I've had friends around me that have had it, and luckily they've just had like a really bad cold. They just feel
Yeah.
like the symptoms of like the flu. Nobody I know has luckily passed away or anything, so it's not too bad. But as I'm sitting here right now, the new variant's out, and people are now talking about maybe Christmas being put down on lockdown again, and a third lockdown right now in the UK would just cripple everything.
It's really tough to try and process what that's going to, do to us interpersonally, societally, culturally. Once again, it's so complex. It's really wild. And the biggest shame of it all to me is that what could have been sometimes when there are these sort of grand calamities, like a pandemic, though our generation, last couple of generations, hasn't really experienced one, to be sure. Sometimes they can be like these unifying events.
Yeah.
Where like I was in New York City, like literally blocks away from the Twin Towers when those planes hit. I was so close that like my hotel shook and the car alarms all around us went off. And I experienced my first feeling, and one of the things I was afraid of was that New York was going to descend into kind of like this riotous chaos.
Yeah.
And people would just be like every man for himself kind of a thing. And the exact opposite thing happened. Like it was this incredible unifying experience where people that would have run you over in the crosswalk the day before were pulling over and handing out masks and handing out water, and everybody just leaned into each other. And the tragic thing about this situation is, in my opinion, one of the tragic things is that it's so swiftly became politicized, and we all factioned out into our little tribal camps. And now we're just sort of like yelling at each other from our respective echo chambers. And it's not good.
No,
like the things that have been happening are destructive,
There's so many divides over here with people not wanting the vaccination and people wanting the vaccination, and people then being, the fact that we're now having our fourth vaccination against this. And then if you go to a certain event, you must prove that you've had one, or otherwise you're not allowed. And everyone's entitled to their own opinion. It's just really difficult. There's no unity. Like you said, with September 11th, people came together. This feels a shame. I mean, the music side of it, we had a test festival for Download over here this year. Really, really filtered down festival. 10,000 people instead of the 80,000, which you're probably used to when you've been here.
You're right. Yeah.
Really small. 2 small stages. Everyone had to do a lateral flow test to go in. But the sense of unity for that moment, for those 2 days, was unbelievable. Everyone came together. Everyone was just grateful to see. It didn't matter who played. It could have been any band in the world, unsigned or the biggest band in the world. Everyone was just so grateful to witness a performance again with people.
That's amazing. I wish that we could have more of that kind of thing. And it's, one of the strange, ironic cruelties of the pandemic is that it's sort of stopped us from doing those types of things for the most part. And sorry, I have a very, very enthusiastic dog. Hey, little dude. His name is Little Dude. Hey, little dude. Hey, I'm trying to teach him shut the fuck up. It's like an actual command, but it's not working.
No, you got to go with the old-fashioned shut up.
Yeah. Hey, shut up. Hey, little dude. Anyway, getting together with thousands of strangers to celebrate music is a modern ritual that we've almost come to take for granted. It's like, oh, my favorite band's coming into town, I'm going to go see them. And it didn't become, I don't think we really realized how important and how beautiful and how necessary that kind of event, that kind of ritual is to us singularly, but also collectively, until it was taken away from us. And that's something that's been really like rushing to the forefront for me. It's, playing music with, 10,000 of my friends and family it's my version of like church. Like I don't go to
Yeah.
church. The closest I go to church is like I surf, or
Yeah.
I walk through the woods, or I go to a concert, or I play a concert. And thankfully here in California, you're allowed to go surfing now, and you're allowed to go for a walk outside. But in the early days of lockdown,
No,
if
none of
you
it.
paddled out, you got arrested. They would confiscate your surfboard, cuff you wet in your wetsuit, fine you $1,000, and then I had buddies who like braved it through the early days of
I was going to
lockdown.
say, were you sat there looking at some of the waves thinking, is that one worth $1,000 fine?
Oh, you better believe it. There were days where I just felt like I had to go for a drive, and I'm very blessed. I live about 10 minutes from the ocean here in the Santa Monica Mountains, and we have the thing called Surfline, and you basically can sign on and look at live cameras of your favorite surf spots just to check how the surf is. And there were a few days, or a handful of days actually, where it was like perfect. Weather was perfect, surf was perfect, and you would see these images that you'd never see under normal circumstances, which is in like an empty lineup. And so we drive down there, and you'd see an empty lineup that's normally has 100 people fighting over waves, and there's one dude. And then there's the cops waiting for him on the beach with the bullhorn, like, get out of the water. And he's just like, you know, like it's worth it. $1,000
Fuck you, I'm enjoying this wave, and if I'm going to pay
Exactly.
$1,000, I'm staying out here for another half hour.
Yeah, exactly. So to answer your question, I kind of wish that I had, because that would have been not only worth $1,000, but a really funny story to tell your kids one day.
So realistically, I don't know if you've had any time to do any research. I wouldn't expect you to, but Mark and Me is a one-on-one podcast. It's been going for 4.5 years. I've been very lucky to have some amazing guests like Anthony Hopkins, Mads Mikkelsen, Kevin Smith, Aubrey Plaza, Kat Von D, a massive mix of people. You're someone I've wanted to speak to for a long time. I hoped that we could have sorted it when you were in the UK last year, but with COVID, obviously, it meant that you couldn't even come over to the UK. Never mind cancel some dates. You just didn't even come over. So I want to say, to start with, a massive thank you for taking the time to come on and make the best of this technology we've got at the moment.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And that list of guests is pretty great. I haven't seen Kat Von D in quite a few years, but she's a pretty great girl.
She's all loved up, and she's happy, and she's got a son, and she's just enjoying life, and she deserves it. So when she came on, and now she's doing music, she's touring and she's doing everything she can. Yeah, she's got a good album out. It's brilliant. It's very synth orientated, 80s sounding. It's brilliant.
That's so cool. I got to reach back out to her. I haven't talked to her in quite a few years, but yeah, my fond memories of her. And she's also a fantastic artist. So
unbelievable.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do today is, for the fans out there, is talk music, but also do touch base and talk about your art, because I've had various artists on here, some of the best in the world, I believe. We've had UK artists and people that have just gone from literally becoming a poster artist for the biggest companies in the world now, like Marvel and Disney and all these big companies. And obviously Anthony Hopkins came on and talked all about his art, which people don't know about. But to touch base on music, because a lot of people will tune in and want to talk and listen about your music, is what I do want to know is what shaped the kind of bands that you listen to today from your early days. So when you were growing up, can you remember those first tapes or vinyls you bought that made you go, fuck me, I want to be in a band? Like, this is the reason I want to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were quite a few. I feel actually pretty fantastically fortunate to have been 15 years old in 1991. We were just waking up from the 80s, which absolutely had its lion's share of incredible music. And one of the first records, actually it was the first record that I ever bought with my own money. The first one that I sought out was The Cure, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. That record really like it shifted my directionality as far as my musical tastes were concerned. Before that, I was, obviously really enamored of lots of different bands and musicians and stuff, but it was more what I was in proximity to. It was what my parents were playing in the car, what my older brother was listening to, my older sister. And so that was a lot more well, when my parents were playing music in the car, it was like everything from the Beatles to Neil Diamond, Elton John, Billy Joel, a lot of Andrew Lloyd Webber, a lot of musical theater stuff. So it was pretty mixed up. And then my older brother was into like heavy metal. So I got my education in Iron Maiden and Motley Crue and
Nice.
The Scorpions and all these bands that, that kind of came of age in the 80s. But turning 15 in 1991 and sort of starting to carve out my own musical tastes, that meant that in one sitting, I remember I saved up all of my like chore money and I went to our local record store and I bought Alice in Chains, Dirt, Soundgarden, Super Unknown.
Oh wow.
Nirvana, Nevermind.
Fucking hell.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and so that in that handful,
wow,
it was like I remember that year in particular. My mind was so successfully blown, and my sort of musical path got skewed so successfully that was the same year that we started our band.
Yeah.
So, but I was also listening to. I just started getting into Faith No More and Mr. Bungle and then Primus and then Rage Against the Machine. And, but then I started like getting super into Bjork and PJ Harvey and, gosh, I mean, the list goes on. And it's incredible. I honestly can safely say that I would be nowhere without all of those albums and so many more. It's incredible to think that an album can change your life or that an artist can change your life, but it's not an overstatement to suggest something like that. Those bands quite literally changed my life because they influenced me. And then, my best friends who I started Incubus with in 1991. And, we did our very best to just like emulate what those bands were doing. And I think we did a good enough job that people were like, oh, this band reminds us of this, this, and this, and this. And that was our first, couple of releases. But by about 1998, 1999, we started to kind of find our thing. And then we've been off on our path ever since. But yeah, that's a good place to start, I suppose.
I mean, listening to that as those foundations of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, you might as well throw Pearl Jam in as well, that sort of time.
Absolutely,
Soundgarden. Yeah. I mean, you don't get much better as a foundation, but do you remember those first shows you went to? Because obviously I remember having Nirvana Nevermind on tape and, reading every lyric of Kurt's on the cassette and being obsessed and Metallica and all this, but do you remember that first gig you went to that made you think, okay, this isn't just a really good thing to listen to. I can see now that it translates to stage and is even on another level. Like this makes my rib, kind of shake. It makes the hair stick up on my neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other part about that period of time and being, fortunate to be 15 in 1991 was also the fact that I was in Southern California.
Yeah.
And so all of those bands came through LA a lot. So I saw all of those bands multiple times when they were like in their like heyday. And that also had a huge impact with seeing not only the bands and the performances and stuff, and really like, as a kid, like you go and you dissect, you're that's how we learn as we're basically a great ape. We mimic each other. That's how we learn how to do stuff, everything basically. And so I was the, little monkey in the audience, like clocking every move from every band member, basically learning how to sing while going to the concerts and singing along and watching the shapes that the singers would make with their mouths to get certain notes and all of it. It was so fascinating. But yeah, one gig that like changed it all. I think it was probably be like, I saw Rage Against the Machine before their first record came out at the Whiskey A Go-Go, which is like 600 person venue. It's a famous little venue. The Doors used to play there all the time, but it's small. It's basically a bar. And the minute they started playing, it was really fucking loud and it was amazing, but then the place just lit up. It was insane. I've been to a bunch of gigs at the Whiskey A Go Go. I saw Slayer there, and I was terrified. It was a terrifying experience.
One of my first gigs was I saw like Green Day and Foo Fighters on their debut tour, but then my parents let me at like the age of 14 go off to Ozfest, and I was like, okay, this sounds cool. Got to see Black Sabbath and all this, but it's the first time I saw real proper heavy metal. And I walked in and I was with my mates, and all these bikers started running towards the stage, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And it was Pantera starting with Cowboys from Hell, and that riff started. I've never witnessed anything like it. And then following that, Slayer came on, and I'm in the same boat as you. I was like terrified, but also absolutely obsessed. Like, I don't care if I get punched right now, because this is incredible.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Like there's a very particular age range. It's probably between like 13 and 18 when you go to a show, and you can be terrified technically for your life, but you're like, this is awesome. Somehow I want to be closer to the thing. And I don't, I'm sure that you've been in your fair share of mosh pits, but perhaps some of your listeners might not know, because it's not quite the same anymore. But like, there was a period of time when in these giant sort of general admission shows, you would basically get like picked up off your feet, and it was fun. You would just be in this like swell of human bodies, and it was scary, but it was really fun. And then all of a sudden, like you'd feel like your feet get pushed up from under you, and then all of a sudden you were floating on top of humans. They call it crowd surfing, which I always hated that term, being an actual surfer, but I suppose it's the closest way to describe what was happening.
I'm too old now. When I go to a festival or a gig now, I'm like, I'm standing back. I just want to watch. I want to see the people on stage. I want to hear it properly. I'm way too old to be down the front.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I won't say that I'm too old. I basically just, my excuse is I'm spoiled rotten. Like, like, you want to come to the gig? Yeah. Can I watch from the stage?
Yeah, I'm gonna stand by the sound guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Incredible. Now, obviously, you've had an amazing career, and it's not over yet. You're still touring and writing with Incubus, and to go for nearly, you said 91, so we're looking at 30 years, which is insane. Bands like Deftones and yourself still keep going, still putting out great music, and still look like you're having the best time of your life when you're touring. Now, what is the secret? Because there are bands out there that last 3 or 4 years, they get to their second album and the pressures just break them, or it's just too much. What is it, do you think, that stands out about Incubus that still every day you want to get up and you want to do that project and make it feel as fresh as the moment you sat and recorded Science in a studio or something else? You want to still go out there and put the heart and soul into everything.
The secret. What is the secret? I honestly don't know a good answer to that question. But you are right in the observation and or the assumption that we care about it as much, if not more now than we ever did. There's something I think that must factor into the experience for us, in that I should just speak for myself. I feel unbelievably. I have a really, really almost overwhelming sometimes sense of gratitude at the opportunity to do this, but then even more distinctly having had and having the experience of being able to express myself creatively and have the experience of living a life of creative curiosity. And I think that curiosity perhaps is what continues to drive the enthusiasm for the experience and wanting to continually explore the space. And that goes with the experience with Incubus, but that also factors into being an artist in general. I think being a painter and also making music on my own. I would make music with Incubus every single day if I could. but we're all in our mid 40s now, and the priorities start to shift, as they should, though. Like they're starting to be like kids and families and things like that. I don't have kids of my own yet, but I hope to one day soon. And I know that that's going to probably pretty dramatically shift certain priorities around as well. But in the event that I can't make music with Incubus every day anymore, I still find myself curiously, digging around in the proverbial sandbox of sorts. And like during lockdown, I started writing music on my own, and then I connected with a really great songwriter producer named John Congleton, and he and I wrote a record together. And it's my new solo record, which I just put out the first single about 2 weeks ago. The song's called Pocket Knife.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Yeah, and the whole record comes out in March. But then I'm going to be on tour with Incubus starting in March in the US. And it's just wild. So going back to that sense of gratitude, it feels incredible to have ever had people's attentions, to ever have had even 10 people's ear at a time, let alone hundreds of thousands or millions of people's attention. And I suppose that I'm drifting towards that greater and greater sense of gratitude, not only as like for lack of a better way of describing it, like a spiritual revelation, but there's also an understanding that living in a kind of quote attention economy, it gets harder and harder and harder to actually get anyone's attention towards anything, even things that are potentially really important, dire, whatever you want to describe it as. The more and more we go into this attention economy, and an economy that's essentially governed by like artificially intelligent algorithms, it gets more and more difficult to put something out and have any sense of guarantee that anyone's going to hear it or see it. And so as we get further into that, I'm like, wow, we had a period of time where we literally had millions and millions of people's attention. And that's an amazing thing. What an incredible opportunity. So I'm just grateful for that. And then going back to your question, like, what's the secret? I also think that that might be part of it, like a sense of gratitude that you hold on to. But then there's something else about learning how to navigate unusual experiences, in particular, the experience of fame or celebrity. Our culture, especially like in the West, we tend to idolize celebrity and fame. We put it on a pedestal of sorts that isn't necessarily good, in my opinion, because the experience of fame and or celebrity, and having had little brushes with it throughout my life, is dangerous. It's really dangerous. I don't think that the human ego is necessarily evolved to deal with an experience like that and come out of it alive. I mean, we can look at so many of my peers and my contemporaries in music and in art, and it grabs people. It takes them. They step into snake pits of sorts, and they can't get out. And I think that one of the things that's kept Incubus and also myself alive through the experiences that I've had, like an awareness that it's like, this is awesome. This is amazing. To be successful in something is incredible. But if you don't learn to recognize it simultaneously as a minefield, you're gonna get hit, and you're gonna get hit hard. Does that make sense?
Massively. And I think it must be difficult because you've had the taste of it and you've been in touching distance and lived some of it. There's been days where you have been on a front of a magazine and, people are just photographing you and doing this. And it must be really difficult when you see people like Kurt Cobain or Jeff Buckley or these people that have unfortunately lost it and not been able to step back and see what was going on and be able to control it. Where I wonder how close you got to the point where, if there was ever a point where you weren't aware and you're trying to get kind of sucked in, and before you knew it, you kind of have to step back, otherwise it's going to be too late. It must be really difficult to juggle.
Yeah, I think I had an early experience of that sort of cognizance of the dangers of it. And it was right when things started to kind of take off for us, right around 1999, when our record Make It Yourself came out.
Yeah.
And I had grown so accustomed to being kind of like the underdog band. Like we got a lot of amazing opportunities opening for bands, but things were steadily going in the right direction for us. But we never had a moment where it like had sort of skyrocketed before 1999.
Yeah.
And when that happened, the minute we started getting airplay, like pretty wide airplay across formats in the US and UK and Europe, we also started getting a lot of sort of FaceTime on MTV. And that really changed the metric pretty quickly. It felt like it was overnight. It went from, we would have a gig and we could walk down the street and grab a sandwich. And then the days later, after our, first MTV appearance, it went from that to, we have a gig tonight and you can't walk down the street to grab a sandwich anymore. And it's a weird experience. And so and then we were also still in this realm of like doing 2 and 3 shows a day. That was just sort of the pace that we were doing, which equated sometimes to like 10 and 12 shows a week. And so there was this experience of exhaustion on top of this new stressor of like, everyone's looking at you, So there was a moment when I was, 24 years old, barely 25, where I was like bordering on kind of like a breakdown, where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm not sure that this is something that I can sustain. I remember asking myself, like, how could anybody sustain this? I have a relatively robust psychology. I'm a sensitive person in certain regards, but for the most part, I have a relative anti-fragility, that I've gained over many, many years. And I remember having that experience being like, this feels untenable. This is not something I can deal with. So I feel very thankful that I had that experience early, because it pushed me in the direction of self-care. And so I started learning how to meditate by the time I was I'd been experimenting with different meditation techniques from the time I was a teenager, but I really started taking it more seriously around 24 years old. And it also changed the metric pretty immediately. Within a matter of about a week, I felt like a different person. And I felt like I could start to navigate this minefield a lot more successfully, because I was much more clear.
It probably really was a point of sink or swim, wasn't it? Be honest to yourself now, because at mid-20s, you want the fame, you want every person in the world to want to know who you are. You want to be the biggest band, headlining the biggest festivals. But at the same time, that comes with such a cost. And the way you took a step back and you found this meditation, you said it changed you within a week. I mean, that's pretty epic. That's pretty epic, because you could have been on the other end and just thought, let's just fucking live this rock and roll life that I've wanted. And the next thing you know, you're burning out. You're trying to do these 10 shows a week and you're just, I'll have an extra few nights out. I'll do a few drugs. I'll take a few drinks extra. And the next thing you know, you're just going to be battered, aren't you?
Yeah. And that's part of what I also witnessed with so many of my friends and peers and contemporaries, was that when I started to ask around, like, what do you, what's your experience been like, and what do you do? And a lot of it was just like, just medicate, just take this and you'll feel better temporarily. And I could never really get on board with that. There was some drug addiction in my family, and there was obviously drug addiction all around me being on tour. It was just like literally anything you want, anything you can think of. It's like, oh yeah, I got a guy right down the street. We can get that for you. And the way that the industry is set up, it's not necessarily set up, or at least this is back then in the 90s and early 2000s. The idea of self-care and mental health, these just weren't phrases that were on our collective radar at that point. And so people were just like, I mean, even from like record labels and management and things like that, were just, can we please get this guy something, or get him someone to, it was all just, they just wanted to kind of brush everything under the rug. And that felt wrong to me as well. So I had to kind of learn to advocate for myself from a pretty young age, but I'm so happy that I did, because knock wood, I'm still alive as a result of it.
And you touched
crazy.
base and talked about your album next year, Echoes and Cocoons. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but did this become about through lockdown, and it started out that you wanted to do an album of covers, and then you kind of played around and then decided the original material is priority? You got to work with a brand new producer, and before you knew it, you had an album's worth of material.
Yeah, that about sums it up. I have a pretty humble recording set up here at my house, but it's enough that I've been able to do the vocals to the last couple of Incubus projects here. And in some regards, I prefer kind of recording my vocals alone, because I can be as particular and obsessive as I want to be. And I can record like 100 background vocals and mix them myself together into these cool little pads and things that we can use as textures. And that takes a lot of time in a expensive recording studio. And then there's other people sort of waiting. And I've just gotten used to working here in that respect on my own. That was pre-pandemic. So once lockdown became a reality, I just started learning other people's tracks that I'd been kind of enamored with over the years, and recorded a few. I put out a few just like on my Instagram. I think the first cover I did was Goodbye Moonmen from Rick and Morty. You know the cartoon Rick and Morty?
Yeah, massive fan.
Yeah. So the episode where the kind of cosmic fart.
Yeah.
Remember the song?
Yeah.
It's kind of Bowie-esque song.
Yeah.
I remember I saw the episode and I was like, this is an amazing song. I know they're kidding, but it's really good. And so I learned it, and my girlfriend like filmed me on an iPhone playing it. And it was fun. But then I started, getting a little more involved with the covers, and thought that was going to be the case. But then I ended up connecting with John Congleton, and he and I were just musing about making music. And I was like, let me send you some ideas. And he's like, and I'll send you some of my ideas. And then we just, we put our heads together kind of like this. Like we did it remotely and digitally. And not very long thereafter, we had a bunch of really rad songs that really felt like it was something, like we'd created something fun. And so there are now only 2 covers on the record. The rest is original material. And it feels like a really cool, fun, interesting album. It's a lot of the material from it was written at the kind of like the darkest point of lockdown. So there's definitely some longing on the album. There's some I suppose dystopic material, but there's also a lot of hope amongst it. So yeah, I really like the record. I hope people like it as well. Yeah.
And with the album coming out and then you're going on tour with Incubus, is it something you think could transfer to stage? Is it something you'd love to do, a tour of just this album and these songs and some of the covers that didn't make it? Have you got this kind of perfect project in your head where you think we could easily do this as a tour?
Yeah. I imagine scenarios where I perform these songs live. This being my 3rd solo record, I actually have quite a lot of material to share in the live sense. And I've only ever done, I think it was 8 shows we did here in the States, but it was like 2014 or something. It was a long time ago now. So in my heart of hearts, I would love to do a series of concerts around this. And I'd love to take it places as well. The first kind of opportunity I have to do so would probably be sometime in the spring of 22. And God willing, I'll be able to travel a little bit and maybe even bring some of the shows to the UK. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Incredible. So there it is. There's the first part of a 2-part series with Brandon Boyd from Incubus. An absolutely beautiful human, inside and out. I absolutely love this first part of the interview, but I don't want to spoil it and say much more because part 2 is there right now, ready for you to listen to. So what I want you to do now is to jump straight onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music or Podomatic or however you listen to podcasts and get straight onto episode 2. It follows this perfectly, focuses all on his beautiful artwork. We get to discuss his mental health, my mental health, the best ways of dealing with stress, anxiety, and so much more. So I'm going to leave it there and say, please meet me for part 2. We're ready and waiting when you are, and I can't wait to speak to you all in just a few moments' time.
To stay long enough for the clouds to fly me away. Oh, it's my time coming. I'm not afraid to die. My fading voice sings above. But she cries to the clicking of time, oh time. Waiting the fire, waiting the fire, waiting the fire, waiting the she weeps on my arm, walking to the bright lights and sorrow. Oh, drink a bit of wine, we both might go tomorrow. Oh, my love, and the rain is falling, and I believe my time has come. It reminds me of the pain I might leave.